Okay, we have a lot more people, and we're feeding them. But when you have more people, and more people are getting food, and more people need housing, and more people need space, that means there's less food, there's less housing, and there's less space for every other animal that has to live on this earth. You commonly hear human beings are putting a strain on the natural environment and on the other species living on this planet with us.
Now that makes sense as a story, but we do have enough information to show that that's not how things really play out in real life. In the US, there have been some big extinctions. You had the Rocky Mountain locust, you had Carolina parakeet, you had the passenger pigeon. But these were all 100 years ago. Since then, conservation became a major issue in the West. In America, this was pioneered by Teddy Roosevelt. Now it's done through governments, but it's also done through organizations like the NRA and hunting organizations across the board. There is a consensus that species need to be preserved for future generations. When you have wealth, that wealth is used to preserve things that are rare and valuable and special. When you don't have wealth, those rare and valuable and special things become a resource.
The conventional wisdom that capitalism damages the environment because all these profit-seeking businesses are thinking about nothing but the bottom line is wrong. And so is the idea that meanwhile we consumers, consuming all this great abundance, are sucking up resources and depriving the creatures we share the earth with of the resources they need.
Let's make the most extreme comparison we have. I'm going to compare the US versus China, where people have their own organs harvested, where they're a resource. You have animals that have been symbols of Chinese culture for centuries. Look at the paddlefish. We have a paddlefish here in America that's so plentiful, its caviar is being used as a replacement for Russian and Iranian caviar. The Russians and the Iranians are doing the same things that the Chinese did. The Chinese hunted the Chinese paddlefish, one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, to extinction. Here, we're breeding paddlefish. The second is the baiji, which is the Chinese river dolphin. Driven to extinction by pollution and other reasons, they called it the goddess of the river. That goddess is gone. A prosperous country will do everything in its power to make sure that nature is preserved. You have the bald eagle, which has gone from being on the verge of extinction to being least concern. Let's look at the panda. Let's look at the panda, one of the great symbols of contemporary China. Pandas are not allowed outside of China except as a loan from the Chinese government at a huge cost to zoos. The Chinese government isn't interested in setting up breeding colonies in other countries to preserve this very rare, special, and unique species. They want to keep it scarce and a monopoly so they make as much money as possible. That is very dangerous for the long-term survival of the panda. Species want to live, they want to reproduce as much as possible, to grow their population. They've evolved for this for millions of years. The vicuña, cousin to the llama, in 1974, they were declared endangered. There were just 6,000 left in all of South America. Just 6,000. 45 years later, after they became protected, there's 350,000. If you protect a species, they tend to rebound very, very quickly.
What it boils down to is that private owners of resources tend to want to preserve the long-term capital value of the things they own. So if you own, let's say, a small pond, you don't fish all the fish out of it in the first year because you know that in year 2 you'll have no fish left. The tragedy of the commons is when you have a pond with no owner. So there's nobody who can capture the value of the pond in year 2, year 3, year 4. There's no owner. So everybody tries to grab as many fish out of that pond in the first year as possible, because if they don't, it's not that those fish will just be waiting for them in the second year and they will have multiplied into more fish. Other non-owners who are just there to grab and not think about the future will just grab those fish. And the result is resource depletion. So you want more private ownership of more resources if you really want to preserve the long-term value and health of those resources.